Coming up in our News 13 election special, it's almost primary election day in North Carolina.
We all know that people have worked very hard and even lost their lives for this right, so vote in honor of that.
What you need to know about new changes at the polls this year.
Republican presidential candidates Donald Trump and Nikki Haley square off.
And if she's going to drop out, I think it'll likely be after North Carolina.
What may happen if Haley is not able to pull off a big win?
Growing concerns over new voting maps ahead of the 2024 election.
Irrespective of how you view this, these are unfair maps.
What's now being done in an effort to throw them out?
Plus misinformation in our elections.
We are already seeing fake videos and fake audio tapes.
News 13 investigates the use of AI and other tactics to create misinformation. Expert advice on how we can fight back.
Welcome to Our Vote 2024 Beyond the Podium special. We begin with the latest from the campaign trail.
So far, 5 states have held their Republican primary elections. First, let's talk about the Michigan primary elections, which happened Tuesday. Donald Trump received 68% of the vote. Nikki Haley received 26%.
South Carolina held its primary elections on Saturday. Donald Trump received 59% of the vote. Nikki Haley received 39% of the vote.
Nevada held a caucus and a primary. Donald Trump won the caucus, and voters chose none of these candidates in the primary over Nikki Haley.
In New Hampshire's primary, Donald Trump beat Nikki Haley by more than 10%.
And in Iowa, Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy were all in the race. Trump won at 51%, followed by DeSantis with 21%, Haley with 19%, and Ramaswamy with 7%. The next primary is right here in North Carolina on March 5th, which is Super Tuesday. Former President Trump's win in South Carolina did not come as much of a surprise after every poll had him winning by a landslide.
It's the second time he has won the South Carolina primary in the last 8 years. Joey Matei was there for Trump's victory speech.
This was a little sooner than we anticipated.
Just minutes after the polls closed Saturday night in South Carolina, Donald Trump was taking the stage in Columbia celebrating a victory.
An even bigger win than we anticipated. And I was just informed that we got double the number of votes that has ever been received in the great state of South Carolina.
After South Carolina voters gave Trump that overwhelming victory, state Republican officials saying that they were impressed by the amount of people who cast their ballots.
I mean, early voting was huge. 208,000 voted statewide in Republican primary early voting versus only 132,000 for the entire Democrat presidential primary. And that's despite the fact that they gave them the first in the nation primary and with an incumbent president on the ballot.
We just hit maximum velocity and we're going all the way.
Trump now has even more of a decisive edge over former Governor Nikki Haley in the race for the GOP nomination, leaving some to shift their focus to the November presidential election.
You've got to do some soul searching about what's best for you, what's best for the party, what's best for the country in order to win the White House.
We're going to be up here on November 5th, and we're going to look at Joe Biden, and we're going to look him right in the eye. He's destroying our country, and we're going to say, Joe, you're fired. Get out. Get out, Joe. You're fired.
On Saturday, Nikki Haley vowed not to back out of the race following that loss in her home state.
Haley thanked her supporters and family for their votes during her campaign in the Palmetto State. Despite losing to Trump again, she congratulated him. She says the race is about choices, and she says both Trump and Biden are the wrong choices. Haley says even though Trump has the majority, she remains optimistic.
I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory. And I want to thank the people of South Carolina for using the power of your voice. No matter the results, I love the people of our state. I love what we accomplished together, and I love how we united during our worst challenges and tragedy.
Right now, Haley is campaigning across Super Tuesday states, trying to drum up more support. President Joe Biden visited North Carolina in January to announce a multi-billion-dollar high-speed internet investment.
And he will be the only Democratic candidate in North Carolina's primary election. President Biden stopped by a cookout with Governor Roy Cooper. He also spoke at an event in Raleigh where he criticized former President Trump's handling of the economy.
He's the only president to be president for 4 years and lose jobs, not gain any jobs.
Now, Dean Phillips, the only Democrat running against Mr. Biden, was unsuccessful in petitioning the state Democratic Party to include him on the ballot.
One of the biggest local races to watch is the battle over the 11th congressional district. Congressman Chuck Edwards is facing Christian Reagan in the primary. We were there when Reagan and Edwards went head-to-head in a debate in Clay County in January. The issues range from protecting Second Amendment rights to military spending.
And if you get an opportunity to look at the number of submarines, the number of nuclear missiles that China and Iran and Russia has relative to the United States, you would agree that we are not spending enough on our defense.
The issue is we're spending way too much money policing the world, and it's costing not us, our generation, but it's costing our children and our grandchildren.
The winner of that primary will face off against Democrat Caleb Rudow in the general election.
Now, from the presidential race to the battle for North Carolina governor's race, there's a lot at stake in the primary elections.
WCU political science professor Dr. Chris Cooper breaks down some of the biggest races and what we can expect. All eyes are on the Republican presidential primary in North Carolina. Despite that, Dr. Chris Cooper says the outcome will likely be similar to the results in South Carolina.
I think we're going to probably see the same kind of thing in North Carolina. We're going to see it throughout the Super Tuesday states.
Cooper says March 5th could be Haley's final test.
If she's going to drop out, I think it'll likely be after North Carolina.
Another big race? The 11th District congressional race.
I mean, all the signs we have say that Chuck Edwards is going to win the primary and win it big. And so the signs we have, one, he's got name recognition. Two, he's an incumbent. He has served in office before, of course, as a state senator.
A big factor, fundraising.
Chuck Edwards doesn't have a huge fundraising haul. We're talking over $500,000, whereas Christian Reagan has somewhere south of $50,000.
Cooper says Reagan has an uphill battle.
Christian Reagan's got a great name. Christian Reagan may even have a great platform, but he just doesn't have the ability to communicate that platform to the voters.
When it comes to the race for the governor, there are battles on both sides.
They both have competition, and they're from legitimate candidates, too. These are not throwaway candidates.
On the Democratic side,
Josh Stein is, of course, running against Mike Morgan, former state Supreme Court justice. He's won statewide office before, but he hasn't really been very active. He hasn't raised a lot of money.
And on the Republican side,
Dale Folwell, our current treasurer, as well as Bill Graham, a business name for the Salisbury area, are trying to get in there. They're spending money. They're raising money. They're spending some of their own money. But still, poll after poll after poll says that Mark Robinson is likely to win that election.
Another big race, the 14th congressional district. Tim Moore clearing the field of potential challengers.
So once Patrick McHenry in the 10th district said that he wasn't going to run again, some of the folks from Tim Moore's district ran up north and they said, I'm going to run in the 10th instead because I don't want to run against Tim Moore.
And when it comes to the general election, North Carolina is still a battleground state.
In 2020, of all the states that Donald Trump won, his margin in North Carolina was the smallest of any of them. So if there's any state that Joe Biden is going to be able to pick off from Donald Trump, North Carolina's got to be at the top of that very short list.
One big unknown for candidates, unaffiliated voters.
Could they wreak some havoc? Could they decide to vote sort of counter to their partisan interest to try to get the least bad candidate from the other side? It's unlikely, but it could happen. And so I think that's the big question mark.
Primary elections may also change the way a candidate campaigns.
Dr. Cooper says certain issues may be more important to primary voters.
Let's say you are running as a Republican in the primary, probably going to lean heavier on immigration, right? Than you might in a general where you have to get that narrow slice of independent voters. Same thing on the Democratic side. They're going to lean more into abortion probably in a primary election and say, hey, I am the most liberal candidate.
Cooper says primary elections can be confusing for some voters due to the number of candidates. He says that means primary voters are generally more partisan people who vote in every election.
And we have more election coverage on WLOS.com. You can find more information about candidates on North Carolina's primary ballot and find out why the names of candidates who are no longer running are still appearing on early voting ballots.
Our primary elections are just days away, and there are some changes coming this year.
We spoke with the Buncombe County Director of Elections, Corinne Duncan, about what voters can expect.
Absentee and early voting is already underway in North Carolina. But if you have not mailed in your absentee ballot, the deadline is rapidly approaching. That's due to a new law in North Carolina.
That law passed and started on January 1st. So that means that all absentee ballots need to be in our office by 7:30 p.m. on election day. So that's a new deadline. It used to be 3 days after, but now it is on election day.
The good news? You still have options.
You can also drop them off in person at our office, and that includes up to 7:30 on election day. And then during early voting, you can drop ballots off at early voting locations.
You will also need to bring something new with you to the polls, a photo ID. However, you will not be turned away if you forget.
Anyone who shows up to vote can always vote. We have provisional voting for that purpose, so that someone who believes that they're eligible to vote can always vote, and then it gets researched on the back end.
If you are early voting, you will be using new express vote voting machines, but it will not be very different than what you're used to.
The process is similar. You just are using a touchscreen instead of a pen, and then you'll put it in the tabulator and get your sticker like you always do.
If you notice something that seems wrong at the polls, there are actions you can take.
The chief judge is in charge of that voting location. So you can go to that chief judge and say, hey, this is going on. And that chief, depending on the level of the incident, that chief judge can take care of it.
You can also reach out to your party representative or the elections office. There also may be people inside and outside the polling location who are not there to vote.
Electioneering is allowed in North Carolina at polling locations. However, none of that can impede voters getting to the polls. There are also appointed observers, and these are observers that are appointed through the political parties. Those names have been submitted to us, so we know who should be in those voting locations.
And you should still go vote, even if you're running late.
If you are at the voting location at 7:30 p.m., you will be allowed to vote.
No matter what, you should exercise your right to cast your ballot.
We all know that people have worked very hard and even lost their lives for this right, so vote in honor of that.
At 7:30 p.m. on election night, early and absentee voting results will be released immediately. Now, after that, precincts will start reporting their election day results. Those results are still unofficial. And then after that, election officials have 10 days to certify the results. That process includes auditing and a hand-eye count.
We audit all of the voting types, so provisional ballots, absentees, early voting, and election day, all against each other in a bunch of different methods. The state is also auditing at the same time.
The County Board of Elections then reviews the votes, certifies the election, and submits the results to the state board.
Coming up, North Carolina has new voting maps for the 2024 election. Why critics are concerned about those changes.
Artificial intelligence could have a major impact on the election. How you can protect yourself from false information.
Buncombe County has one of the most competitive state house district seats in North Carolina.
It's the result of Republicans once again passing new voting maps. And I look into why who represents you in Raleigh and Washington may change again before the end of the decade.
Any bills that made it
North Carolina State House Representative Lindsay Prather is running for a second term to keep her political job.
And if voters send you back to Raleigh, what are you hoping to accomplish?
Providing more funding and resources to help combat mental health crises. Our schools, we saw barely an increase in salaries for teachers and for funding in our schools this year. We have seen inflation rise, and we've not seen wages keep up with inflation.
The Democratic lawmaker represents District 115, which now covers northern and western Buncombe County. It used to cover the southwestern part of the county. It's a seat a Republican has not had since Nathan Ramsey from 2013 to 2015. But Asheville attorney Ruth Smith hopes to change that.
What made you want to run to represent some voters in Buncombe County?
Because I've worked with injured workers and with people on disability, I've seen firsthand the difficulties they've had in getting quality care, access to care. Also, my mom was a school teacher. Okay. And you don't learn about the education and the inner workings of an education like you do when your mom is a school teacher.
Experts say Smith's path to victory as a Republican is slightly easier now in this House district. Why? Because voting maps were tweaked by Republicans again. It came after the conservative-led state Supreme Court ruled last year partisan gerrymandering is legal. That means the party in charge can legally dilute the voting power of the other party.
How are you feeling about your chances in Buncombe County in District 115?
I feel good about my chances, not because so much of the way the district is drawn. I feel good about my chances because I'm a good candidate. And the people of Buncombe County know me. I've worked with them for 25 years, serving them in the court system. So my name is out there.
And for round two, you have an uphill battle because what has changed in your district?
The new district, out of the 20 precincts in the new district, only 4 of them are the same as the precincts that I currently represent. The district, I feel, was drawn by Republicans for very partisan reasons. And it was not drawn to try to accurately reflect voters in Buncombe County. It was drawn specifically to try to put a Republican back in the state legislature from Buncombe County.
This raises a red flag in a so-called purple state. For University of North Carolina Asheville political expert Giovanni Pleitez Hernandez.
Irrespective of how you view this, these are unfair maps.
As a political expert, why are these maps to you unfair?
If one party wins with, say, 55% of the vote and gets X number of seats, if the opposite party were to get that same turnout statewide, right, or like as a whole, then we should see that party get the same amount of seats, right? Whenever there's a disconnect between that, then that means that there is something wonky.
Another form of gerrymandering is racial. That's when districts are drawn to dilute the Black and Latino vote. And now, Republican state lawmakers are being sued by groups like Common Cause over claims of racial gerrymandering.
I know that in eastern North Carolina, there are some issues with racial gerrymandering. So what has Common Cause done to try to put those issues to bed?
And we feel like the maps drawn, both House and Senate, that there are districts that are racially discriminatory.
The legal team at Brennan Center for Justice is following 2 voting maps federal cases out of North Carolina. The one that includes the NAACP and Common Cause claims. All 3 maps violate the National Voting Rights Act, and there is intentional discrimination. The groups want to see 6 majority Black state House districts and 2 majority Black state Senate seats for the next election in 2026. This does not have a direct impact on our area. The other suit was filed by the Elias Law Group. It is representing voters challenging 4 districts on the congressional map over racial gerrymandering, including District 14, which covers all of Rutherford and part of Polk County. They will each go before a 3-judge panel and will likely be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. But for now, all candidates are focused on current maps and getting their messages out.
I get to get out there and meet the voters and hear what their concerns are.
I know that we have amazing people, amazing schools, amazing small businesses in this state, and I want to help create policies that allow those people and those businesses to thrive.
In Buncombe County, Ty Russell, News 13 investigates.
And I should note, Democrat Governor Roy Cooper does not have veto power over voting maps. And coming up, the primary elections are just days away, and there's a lot of false information out there. The impact from artificial intelligence and how you can protect yourself.
False information is abundant and a growing issue. It can be found in campaign ads, speeches, posts from talking heads on TV, and on social media.
Now there's fear that misinformation and disinformation could spread more with artificial intelligence.
This just in, we can now call the 2024 presidential race for Joe Biden.
For 10 months, this attack ad has been on YouTube.
This morning, an emboldened China invades Taiwan.
It was posted by the GOP, claiming this is what the country could become under President Joe Biden.
Border agents were overrun by a surge of 80,000 illegals yesterday evening.
The Republican Party admits, not in the title, but in a post underneath the video, it was generated through artificial intelligence, or AI. That means a computer or software that can think like a human made the video. Now look at these pictures. Someone used AI to release fake photos of former President Donald Trump sitting in jail, running from police and being taken down by cops in New York City. They were posted on X, formerly known as Twitter. Only one post I found admitted they were AI generated, but there was nothing on the actual photos to say they are fake.
Anybody can create a fake video. So I think there's a lot of concern about how this election is going to unfold and the role that disinformation could play.
Daryl West, who studies AI, is with nonpartisan think tank Brookings Institution. He has seen some videos and pictures that are so disturbing, we won't show them on TV.
There have been people who have put Nikki Haley's head on the body of a naked woman to try and shame and embarrass her.
So what should be done about this, like from lawmakers and from communities, from people? What should be done?
The good news is both Republicans and Democrats are paranoid that AI is going to be used against each side.
These AI-generated videos and pictures are usually meant to spread false information and sway public opinion. You'll also hear them referred to as deep fakes, and it gets scarier. Some are just audio.
What a bunch of malarkey.
This is from a CNN report. It sounds like President Biden.
It's important that you save your vote for the November election.
But it's a fake robocall to voters in New Hampshire.
That call was indeed fake and not recorded by the president.
And it turns out, reports say a Democratic operative made it. He tried to discourage people from voting for Mr. Biden in the primary.
If you are running a campaign for office, your job is to make your candidate look good and the other candidates look bad. Are you going to lie? Probably not. But are you only going to emphasize the things that fit that agenda? Absolutely.
Political expert Dr. Chris Cooper says journalists, voters, and politicians have work to do to protect our country.
Who is responsible for fighting disinformation and misinformation?
I mean, I think all of us, right? I think all of us are responsible for fighting it.
And so what should voters do to make sure that they are getting accurate information?
You know, one, I think lean into the local to whatever degree possible, right? Whether it's local television, whether it's local print media, even local websites like we have here in the region that know something about the place.
So far, North and South Carolina, along with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, have not regulated the use of AI in political campaigns. However, last week, Georgia House lawmakers voted to make it illegal to publish deepfakes 90 days before the election. And late last year, Facebook's parent company Meta banned politicians and their teams from posting AI-generated videos or images on its platforms. So whether it's AI, a campaign ad, a website, or a post on social media, West doesn't want you heading in the wrong direction ahead of Election Day.
It's also going to happen in state elections, probably even in local races. So people really need to be on guard.
And here are some of the upcoming dates and times you need to know about. Saturday, March 2nd is your last chance to vote early. Now after that, North Carolina's primary elections are on Super Tuesday, March 5th.
In-person early voting for the general elections begins on October 17th and ends on November 2nd. After that, Election Day will be November 5th.